Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudes, and our first show of 2016 in this series about the network of global corporate control is coming to you live from DCTV's studio in the nation's capital. What is the network of global corporate control? It's a mega conglomerate that thinks it runs the world, but it really doesn't. It uses secret societies to do its business in the shadows. Today's show is about my letter to General Joseph Dunford, Jr., who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, telling him that there is a global currency reset to switch from paper currencies all over the world to gold, and about the switch out of Federal Reserve notes. And I'd like to show that cartoon. Yes, thank you. The silliest show on earth. It shows Uncle Sam standing on his nose with the unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes that are about to crash, trying to balance. I post archives of this series on the internet. When I couldn't post 3 of the shows on YouTube, those were shows on secret societies, on gold, and on the military, I posted them instead on archive.org. I would love to answer any questions that you have. We document everything that we say here. And my email is karenhudes@hotmail.com. And there are also comments up on other social media. The United States military tried to justify limiting the access of soldiers to the social media. I shot down this idea in a tweet to Major John Spencer. And when you look at the posting, you will find my letter to Major Spencer. It says, "This is in response to your op-ed in the New York Times bemoaning soldiers' access to social media. The real problem you're facing is that social media has ended the censorship by the now bankrupt network of global corporate control. This conglomerate was identified by 3 mathematicians, Vitali Glatfelder and Battiston of ETH Zurich. Most Americans, and that includes soldiers, know that the New York Times is simply bankers' propaganda and nothing more." I'd like to give you a little background. In last week's show, I explained the agreement that was reached at the World Bank and International Monetary Fund annual meetings in Lima, Peru, in October. I am now authorized to speak on behalf of the 188 ministers of finance and development that are on the World Bank Board of Governors concerning the Global Debt Facility. What is the Global Debt Facility? It contains the United States and rest of the world's monetary gold reserves and other wealth. The Global Debt Facility was established by Eisenhower, Truman, and the rest of the world's leaders and royalty at the end of World War II. In previous episodes, which are now all archived, and you can go back and see them if you're just watching this for the first time, we discussed some of the other assets in the Global Debt Facility. So you can see there's the gold and a statement signed by Truman and Eisenhower. We discussed the Koh-i-Noor diamond, and there's a lot of history behind that diamond. That's the world's largest diamond. We discussed a train that was buried in Poland in a tunnel containing the Amber Room and Monet paintings. I've written to the embassies that are now dealing with these assets, reminding them that it's the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund that are responsible for administering the Global Debt Facility, and not the individual governments. And you're looking at a Monet painting made of Ferdinand Marcos and Imelda Marcos. Miss Bautista was convicted for having tried to sell that painting, and it belongs to the world's people. That trust is for the benefit of all of humanity. As far as the Nazi gold train in Poland, After I wrote to the embassies, including the Swiss embassy, because Switzerland represents Poland on the development committee, they now say in the news there may be a tunnel, but there's no train. Using ground radar, you can see very clearly whether or not there was a train. Obviously, they now know that they have to wait until the development committee handles this issue. How did I get to be the overseer mandate trustee for the Global Debt Facility? I'm a lawyer and economist who worked in the World Bank legal department for 21 years. I reported corruption at the World Bank. After I was illegally fired in 2007, I did not quit. That was because a political scientist named Jacek Kugler, who developed an accurate political science model in the Department of Defense about how to end war, came to the World Bank in 2004. He was warning me that we had 5 years to prevent a nuclear war in the Middle East. That's Syria that we're now dealing with. So far, we've managed. The power transition model showed that in order to avoid World War III, it was necessary to keep Germany as an ally. And you notice in the news now that Germany is speaking very actively with Russia about solving the Syria issue. And I am in touch with all of these governments, and they know full well that the United States, minus the Federal Reserve, is going to be joining Germany and Russia, and we're also going to be joining the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. I've been following the power transition model like a blueprint. That's why I reported to Senator Lugar in 2006 that Eckhard Deutscher, who was representing Germany on the board of executive directors at the World Bank, who said that the executive directors at the World Bank were treated like mushrooms, kept in the dark, and covered with fertilizer. The Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury Department do not hold Germany's international gold reserves. These are in the Global Debt Facility. That is why the United States Treasury Department lied to Germany when Germany asked for its gold back in 2013. Since then, Germany's second largest business website published an article about why a German helicopter buzzed the United States consulate on September 9, 2013. Sputnik News carried my comment in an article called Berlin's Dilemma: German Politicians Eager to Restore Relations with Russia. And I was checking when I prepared the teleprompter to see whether that comment was still up. I looked on my PC and it was missing, so I tweeted that. I tell people everything, whether or not it's good news. This includes my reports to the countries at the World Bank. This includes my reports to the people who follow me on the internet. That's when somebody tweeted back to me that the comment was not taken down, it was still there. Because sometimes my PC doesn't show what's really on the internet because it's hacked. I once had a technician tell me that there were 17 different groups monitoring what I do on the internet. I'll read you my comment on Sputnik News. Angela Merkel is an agent of the network of global corporate control. The false reality of the network of global corporate control is becoming increasingly unraveled since I explained why a German helicopter buzzed the United States consulate in Frankfurt. The most likely scenario is that the United States, Germany, and Russia kick out the Federal Reserve and the rest of the Bank for International Settlement central banks at the center of the network of global corporate control in a global currency reset. What does this mean? It means that we're in the middle of a global currency reset and that the United States is in the middle of an interregnum until we end the secret military rule. I described in a letter to the 25 ministers on the Development Committee and published this on the internet exactly how we're changing over from unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes to Treasury dollars and then to Aurum from the Global Debt Facility. What are Aurum? This is gold pressed very thin in a plastic envelope. People are going to fill in a form that is going to be published shortly, and they're going to tell the Development Committee how many Federal Reserve notes that they're going to be exchanging for Treasury dollars. up to a limit of $1 million per person, and which address that they want the Global Debt Facility to mail them a certificate that they're going to present in order to exchange Treasury dollars for Federal Reserve notes. I will read you one sentence from that letter, how individuals can get certificates for exchanging more than 1 million Federal Reserve notes. Because of the corruption in the international financial system arising from the network of global corporate control, additional certifications for the exchange of Federal Reserve notes will need to be determined after the United States has ended its interregnum pursuant to Article 5 of the Constitution of 1789. I described on the internet my conversation with a man who called me on my cell phone on the 30th of December. He introduced himself to me by saying that he owned a lot of companies, and then he started talking to me about the martial law in the United States and General Dunford. It was not a cordial conversation. Part of our conversation was about whether or not he was trying to intimidate me. Before I start reading my letter to General Dunford to you, I want to acknowledge Dwight Hammond Jr. and his son Stephen, who are two cattle ranch patriots that went to jail yesterday in order to keep the peace in the United States. They had already served one jail sentence after being convicted for arson because of fires which they put out at no cost to anyone. United States District Judge Ann Aiken, who resentenced Dwight Hammond Jr. and his son Stephen, is not presiding over a court under Article 3 of the United States Constitution. All of these unconstitutional courts are going to end their reign of terror shortly, as the martial law in the United States that started in 1861 ends in a global currency reset. I called the media out because they're covering up the real news that the unconstitutional courts are getting closed down and replaced by true Article 3 courts in the global currency reset. Dwight and Stephen Hammond and other people who did not harm anyone are working under slavery in those privately owned jails for the network of global corporate control. These people are going to be liberated soon. I also want to mention briefly another story where the dishonest journalists are distracting and frightening the public. This is about Puerto Rico's January 1st default on its debt. Bloomberg refused to cover the story that all country debt is getting offset against the $2 quadrillion in Treaty of Versailles bonds that the 60 central banks owe to the Global Debt Facility. These central banks are private. They're not public. Now I'm going to read part of the letter. In the remaining time today, I will post the full text. I sent this letter yesterday to General Joseph Dunford, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Office of the Chairman. Dear General Dunford, on October 7th, at the World Bank and IMF annual meetings in Lima, I met with India's Minister of Finance and former Minister of Defense, His Excellency Arun Jaitley, with Malawi's Minister of Finance, His Excellency Goodall E. Gondwe, and 20 other missions. During those meetings, we agreed that any country which disagrees with my statements on behalf of the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF concerning the Global Debt Facility containing the world's monetary gold reserves and other assets must go on record in writing. I confirmed this arrangement with the New York missions and Tokyo embassies. Prior to this, I had been clearing in advance the statements that I made on behalf of the Board of Governors as when I issued this press release. This was not necessary when I invalidated attempts to steal the world's assets in the Global Debt Facility, and just yesterday there was another such attempt, and I have written on the internet my response to General Dunford. After the India-Africa Summit, I informed Texas and the Joint Chiefs of Staff of my understanding with the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. I broadcast this understanding with the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF on the November 10th episode of this series. And I also posted it on my social media and on other websites. And let me tell you what I posted on Silver Doctors. I wanted to thank Silver Doctors for bringing my comment on Alistair McLeod's economic doomsday scenario out of moderation last week. This is after I posted the comment in my social media, and it was retweeted 16 times. And some of the people that retweet my comments have many thousands, some of them millions of followers. Marshall Swing also persists in ignoring the elephant in the room, the global debt facility containing the world's international monetary gold reserves, administered by the Bretton Woods Board of Governors. The global elites are aware that people already know that their media is bought and sold by the network of global corporate control, identified by Vitali, Glatfelder, and Battiston. It would be kind of nice for Silver Doctors to end your discredited doomsday charade already. The chances that the world's gold comes out of hiding and is deployed to replace that scam called fractional reserve fiat currencies with national currencies minted out of gold and local currencies is more than 90%, according to a power transition model from the U.S. Department of Defense. Meanwhile, the Joint Chiefs of Staff know that the loyal military, including the Joint Japan-U.S. Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement, backed the monetary agreement to complete what John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan set out to accomplish before they were gunned down. And then I showed what I had said to the India-Africa Summit. Pursuant to the Articles of Agreement of the World Bank, the United States President does not appoint the President of the World Bank because the 66-year-old Gentleman's Agreement ended in 2010. Ever since, I've been working with the Coalition for the Rule of Law on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund to end the corruption in the international financial system. Under Section 4 of Article 5 of the Articles of Agreement of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the Board of Executive Directors is responsible for conducting the general operations of the World Bank. The United States Executive Director on the board, Mr. Matthew Maguire, broke the Articles of Agreement of the World Bank, and he has no further role to play in the global currency reset. And then I referred to a letter that I wrote to the Development Committee on December 28th and an email to the chair of the Development Committee, which was confirmed the following day on DCTV and tweeted. I also referred to the statement of 4 minutes into the broadcast. Quote, "You have not heard from any country denying that I speak for the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF." Unquote. The network of global corporate control interrupted the live streaming of that broadcast. Perhaps they've interrupted it this week, but we're going to be posting the broadcast on the internet right afterwards. Now the network of global corporate control is breaking my links, which I simply repost. One of the links that they like to break is the study that Ronald Reagan commissioned, the Grace Commission, which shows that all of the income taxes leave this country and they go to the network of global corporate control. The whole world is sick and tired of the network of global corporate control and its paper currency scam. Pursuant to Article 5 of the 1789 Constitution of the United States, there was to be a convention to consider the applications of more than 2/3 of the state legislatures. Upon the failure of the United States Congress to convene this convention, your secret military rule is nothing other than an interregnum in the legitimate government of the United States. I informed you of the fact that you have usurped power and your military rule has no legitimacy. The Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF are exchanging Federal Reserve notes for the Treasury dollars printed by Ronald Reagan, held by the Global Debt Facility. And during this interregnum, you have no authority to disrupt that procedure. so that the Federal Reserve notes can crash and unilaterally surrender United States military might. And I wanted to add that today, this morning, I sent another letter telling the Board of Executive Directors about the attempt to steal the United States monetary gold reserves that are in the global debt facility. And I made sure that people understood that General Dempsey is simply going to be winding down the conflicts that are going on all over the world that were instigated by the network of global corporate control. We are in an interregnum, and we are going to be dealing with that interregnum peacefully. We have the infrastructure to do that peacefully. That was established at the end of World War II. That's called the Bretton Woods institutions, and many people are nervous because we have never done anything like this before. And one of the ways that we're going to be sure to keep the peace is for people who have been following this saga to reach out to the people in their area. And these people are going to be, some of them, taken aback because this is something that they just didn't expect. They had confidence in their elite. They believed what they were told on the media. And some of these people are going to be very upset, obviously. Some of them are going to feel betrayed. And for that, we have to look inside ourselves, and we have to be compassionate with these people, because many of us understand what it feels like when we're told something about ourselves that may not be pleasant, something that we've been hiding from ourselves. It's very human to be able to recognize the faults in others before we recognize our own faults. So you have to think about what it feels like when you're confronted with a fault that you didn't want to admit. You have to be very compassionate with people that are going to be confronted with the faults of the mainstream media that has been systematically lying to them. One of the things that we don't realize about ourselves is that humanity is actually very compassionate. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about a study where it turns out that people will pay more money to try to prevent pain from other people than pain that would be caused to themselves. We're going to have to really stretch ourselves to understand what it's going to feel like for people who had never expected the lies that have been systematically told to them. And we also learned in an earlier episode that these lies have been systematically reinterpreting our history, going back to the ancient history. That was Moscow State University has published all of this updated history on their website. There is a lot of information that is going to be coming into public sight. And this information is not going to be coming from the mainstream media. It's going to be coming because people are going to learn that they have to look elsewhere. And most of the information that you're getting from the internet on the alternative media is also misinformation. The best way to learn what accurate information is to join a group of friends, like a study group, and practice discerning what is real, what is accurate news. It's like putting a puzzle together. And it's going to be something that we're all going to be working on. I'm sitting right in the very center of this effort. I'm passing the information that I learned from people up to the elites, and I'm passing the information that I get from the elites back to the people. And I'm going to be continuing to do this as long as people understand that that's all I'm doing. I am not going to be deciding anything for the elites. I'm not going to be deciding anything for the people. But we are going to be working on cleaning up the corruption that has permeated our system. I now see that we have another 5 minutes. Unfortunately, we don't have a call-in procedure, but I can tell you what some of the comments are that I've been receiving. One of the comments is telling me that I'm not really compassionate. There are people that tell me about the things that they've been experiencing, children that are taken away from them, that they had every right to believe they were allowed to raise. One of the people who has experienced this is a man who taught us about the financial statements in all of the municipalities. They're called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports. It turns out that many of the cities are actually very rich. They just don't bother to tell anybody. They've been earning a lot of money on the capital markets. That's Mr. Burian. And he has not been able to see his children or raise them for many, many years. There are terrible things that happen to people who have been fighting the network of global corporate control. So every day I receive at least 4 emails from people telling me about the punishment that they've been receiving because they've been bucking the system, and they expect me to try to do something for them. Unfortunately, I'm at this point not in a position to help anybody with this kind of thing. The most I do is sometimes I will post their stories and see if there's anyone else that can help them. I've done this a few times. But we are going to have to learn how to set up systems that are going to transform what's been happening up until now. Our prison system, this is owned by private companies. I published on the internet a story about how some of the states had signed contracts with these prisons, promising the number of prisoners that they were going to get, and the prisoners are made to work without receiving the normal wages that a free person would be earning. This is a form of slavery. We're going to have to figure out how to free the people in this private slavery system. And when I say we, it's not me. It's going to be the people that are in these study groups and that are going to be transforming our country from one that has been secretly ruled by societies behind closed doors and making people frightened and intimidating the politicians, the ones that haven't been bought off. It's going to be a colossal job, and we're going to have to do this very carefully because we do not want to totally upset the apple cart. The changes are going to be fundamental. But we're going to be doing these changes in a very careful way so as not to disrupt the economies. On behalf of the 188 ministers of finance that administer the global debt facility, I inform General Dunford that there's an interregnum in the legitimate government of the United States and that martial law in the United States is ending in the global currency reset. There is a stark contrast between what is really going on and the distorted news coverage in the media owned by the network of global corporate control. It would be good if many people will start to post their own news and inform people about what's going on in their local areas, especially because the most important currency in the global currency reset is going to be the local currencies. And we'll be discussing in future broadcasts how to do this. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudes.